Time for the press review with Alison Sargent. Good to see you, Alison.
You too, Delano.
You're starting out in Ireland, where papers there are reacting to a long-awaited report on abuses carried out in Catholic homes for unwed mothers.
This report found that some 9,000 children died in the institutions under investigation, about 15% of all of the babies that were born in these homes. In a very moving front page here, the Irish Examiner has published the names of all of the children who died in one of the homes, Bessborough. Their birth dates span from 1922 to 1994. A reminder that some of these homes existed up until the early 90s. The paper also lists how long these children lived. Many survived for just weeks or months. The Irish Independent, meanwhile, calls the report a nation's shame on the front page. The paper also headlines on the reactions of Irish Taoiseach Micheál Martin. He said that the mistreatment in these homes was supported by both the church and the state in Ireland. Finally, the Irish Times writes in its editorial today that this report should make the entire country feel ashamed, just as this system existed, they write, to make these women and children feel ashamed. For the Irish Times, this report is a very important act of restitution, along with the Taoiseach's apology today.
It's clearly an awful report. Switching gears next to India, where the Supreme Court has hit the pause button on reforms to the country's agricultural laws.
That's right. These laws have sparked huge protests, with tens of thousands of farmers camping out in the capital, New Delhi. This decision to put the laws on hold breaks the deadlock they've been facing with the government. The Indian paper, The Asian Age, calls it a major breather for Narendra Modi's government. In addition to suspending the laws, the court also ordered a 4-person panel to look into the farmers' grievances. We see those men pictured here. But protesters have pointed out that all 4 of these men actively advocated in favor of these reforms. As we read on the front page of The Hindu today, they're rejecting this panel as a government ploy.
So the governments aren't happy about this decision. What are the papers saying?
Well, protesters aren't really seeing this a victory, and papers don't really know what to think about it. They don't know what to make of the Supreme Court's decision to intervene in this way. The Times of India writes in its editorial that the proactiveness of the court on the issue of farming laws is really at odds with the passivity it's shown in the past in other cases. They give the example of laws against interfaith marriage, or what they call the archaic sedition law. In those cases, the quote smack of executive overreach, well, it might have made sense for the Supreme Court to intervene, they say, but the paper writes that doing so now to quell this agitation is really a needless risk for the Supreme Court.
Moving to Washington next, Alison, where lawmakers in the House want to pass a bill to punish lawmakers who refuse to wear masks.
That's right. Rule breakers would be fined $1,000 a day for refusing to wear masks on the Capitol grounds. Now, as we read in the Washington Post, this comes after at least 3 House Democrats tested positive for COVID-19 after sheltering in place during last week's riot with Republican colleagues who refused to put masks on. One of the Democrats who's now tested positive for coronavirus has written an op-ed for the paper. Representative Bonnie Watson-Coleman from New Jersey, you see her here. She's 75 years old. She's a cancer survivor. She writes, "Refusing to wear a mask is not an act of self-expression. It is an act of public endangerment."
Indeed. And switching gears next to a lighter story, I might add. Sex and the City fans, a show that really pushed the envelope. The show is coming back, but one of the central characters, the craziest character, is not.
Yeah, the craziest character, Delano, the character many people really said put the sex in Sex and the City. This is Samantha Jones, not going to be part of the reboot. The reason for this is a very well-documented feud, kind of bad feelings between the actress who plays Samantha, Kim Cattrall, and Sarah Jessica Parker, who plays kind of the main character, Carrie. Now, doing the reboot without Samantha was really the only way, but a lot of fans think it's not worth it at all. This writer from Rolling Stone writes that on top of that, there are also a lot of reasons that this reboot is a bad idea. Notably, they say Sex and the City has aged rather poorly. It presents a fantasia of New York City in which everyone is white, thin, and heterosexual. We get similar arguments from a writer in Vogue. She writes, "A reboot after those movies? Honey, take it from me, never revisit a mistake you already made twice." And if there is one thing that Samantha Jones knows, Delano, it is when to leave a party.
Indeed. Speaking of parties next, a very French story, I think. A woman has been trying to prove here in France, rather, has been trying to prove to the authorities that she's not, in fact, dead. She's alive.
That's right. This woman's name is Jean Pouchin. She was not quite ready to leave the party yet. She is very much alive. The Guardian's correspondent, Kim Wilshire, met her along with her very impressive cat, who you see in that photo. Now, you might be wondering how this woman was declared dead in the first place. It all has to do with a complicated legal dispute she had with a former employee. That employee thought that she was dead and told a court so. The court, without verifying any certificates, declared the woman dead. And then, of course, all of her documents, ID card, bank account, all of that stuff was invalidated, and she needs it to prove that she's alive. A simple medical certificate doesn't cut it. She is now working with a lawyer on the case and is really hoping to be resurrected. I have to say, this story kind of plays into all of the stereotypes we have about France being a bureaucratic nightmare.
Indeed, it is a bureaucratic nightmare. If you know it, you know it. Thank you very much for that, Alison. Alison Sargent there with the press review.